Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode, the show where I give you guys a new prog review, an album that I'm excited about, that I want to share with you. If you like the same type of prog music that I tend to like, I want you guys to hear these albums because they're well worth your time and attention to go seek out, and today's is no exception. This is Joe Deninzon and Stratospheerius and the album Impostor. This was a new group for me, someone I hadn't heard of before, but this album was brought to my attention and I was just blown away by it. Joe Deninzon apparently is a new member of Kansas after the retiring of David Ragsdale. He plays violin, and he's a fantastic violin player, and you hear it all over this record. It's one of the prominent features for sure here. This band in particular, Joe Deninzon and Stratospheerius, was formed in New York in 2001 and has gone through various lineup changes and have several albums under their belts. But to me, this takes it to a new level. This is an album well worth checking out, especially if you love modern progressive rock along the lines of like Spock's Beard and Pattern Seeking Animals and Neil Morse Band and all of that kind of flavor. Definitely has a feel for that, but also dips into the past with some feels of Kansas, obviously, of Yes, and a little bit of a Gentle Giant touch and flavor, and they definitely lean into a bit of a classical feel at moments. I think with violin being such a featured instrument, that's kind of a natural progression. Also a little bit of King Crimson. In fact, there's a King Crimson cover on this album, Frame by Frame, which features some really cool interpretations of the track with a more violin-focused nature to it. But still plenty of those kind of quirky angular guitars and off-kilter beats that you'd expect from King Crimson's sound. But overall, yeah, it's just a fantastic record to listen to. Maybe tinges of a bit of an AOR sensibility, like Toto, some of the 80s big rock classics as well. But it's an interesting record for sure, with some great playing, some great people guesting on it all the way throughout from the modern prog scene. And has poignant lyrics that are very relevant to our current day. Explores lyrical themes about cancel culture, about dystopian Big Brother syndrome, damage done by religious intolerance, humanity's constant state of anxiety, and imposter syndrome, like on the title track. So you get some really relevant material here about a perspective about many of our modern day issues done in a classic symphonic prog style. On the record itself, you've got Joe Deninzon, who does lead vocals, electric 7-string Viper violin, acoustic violin, viola, chincello, acoustic guitar, and bass. Michelangelo Curinali on guitars and backing vocals, Paul Ranieri on bass and backing vocals, Bill Hubauer of Neil Morse Band fame on keyboards and backing vocals, and Jason Gianni on drums, percussion, and backing vocals. So a cool lineup, and like I said, there's also some notable guest spots all throughout the record. Voodoo Vortex Part 2 opens the record, a big proggy instrumental opening that's only a little over a minute and a half long. There's also a Part 1 of this instrumental track that comes later in the record, which has some really cool majestic violin lines and swirling proggy keys, almost a dreamy psychedelic type feel before it gets into more of a rockier Kansas vibe. And I think Bill Hubauer really shines on the keyboards on this track in particular. A fantastic instrumental in 2 parts. Outrage Olympics was the first single, at least that I heard from the record, which starts off with some majestic keyboard playing. It has a bit of that quirky sound that I've been mentioning, not unlike Spock's Beard, a modern prog sensibility of fun with catchy hooks aplenty, and the violin and ever-present factor throughout the track. And the end, I feel like, has a bit of a majestic Kansas and Yesian feel with violin and melodic, almost Howe-esque guitar lines. So a really fantastic track, a great showcase for what the band's about. If you want like a taster, a teaser of what to expect on the record, I think this is a good song to check it out with. Impostor, the title track, has some really furious violin playing. I was almost reminded a bit of Dixie Dregs, perhaps. When the music takes a bit of a seat back, we get a bit of an 80s King Crimson vibe with angular sounds and expressive vocals, and it has some more of that fun energy on top of it. Perhaps some Kansas vibes with that epic violin solo towards the end. I just think it's fantastic. Cognitive Dissonance gives you a bit of more harder rocking headbanging vibes with those cool violin flourishes. We get Randy McStein taking over vocals for the second verse and some great instrumental battles between violin and guitar as the song fades out. It's only 5 minutes long, but you get a lot in that package, a lot of cool progginess and interesting soundscapes. Storm Surge is one of the ones that has more of a classical sound to it. Really fascinating. Some classical guitar, some cello, very interesting vocal performance. Michael Sadler is a guest singer on this piece, and I love the touches of flute and piano that come, I believe, courtesy of Rachel Flowers as well. Some cool classical style breakdowns in the middle with great stringed instruments. I really like this infusion of classical sound, and like I've mentioned, it kind of brings to mind Gentle Giant, which is always a positive in my eyes. This comes back in Tripping the Merry-Go-Round, which I believe I've read somewhere that it was described as if Gentle Giant wrote Eleanor Rigby, which that's like a dream come true for me as a huge Gentle Giant and Beatles fanatic. And I think that's right on target for what you can expect in this track, with some really cool classical style instrumentation with violin and guest cellos and those Gentle Giant-ish style vocals on top of it all. It's only 2 minutes long, but it's one of my favorite pieces on the record, in fact. And then we end this whole record with a really interesting epic, a 12-minute piece called Chasing the Dragon. This is where you hear a bit of those like AOR type sounds like Toto, bit of 80s tinged keyboards, percussion and vocals. I feel like I hear a bit of like an accordion sound as it builds more soundscapes. I love hearing Bill Hubauer's backing vocals on this track, bringing to mind Neil Morse Band, the driving rhythm, some cool bass solo featuring some really cool classical soundscapes. There's stabs of this kind of classical style throughout this track as well. We get a powerful proggy section after some alarm clock sound effects, led by some furious violin. We get some cool rocking sections. Some female vocals from Chloe Lowry are featured here as well. And at the end, you get this furious playing between guitar, violin, and keys. Maybe the dragons are fighting each other or something of that nature. Imagine what you will. In a fiery instrumental workout towards the end. Just total fun all throughout this record. Just some great tracks. And if you love modern progressive rock, if you love Spock's Beard, if you love a bit of Kansas's energy, especially in their newer, later releases, I think this is well worth your time and attention. It's fun. It's a blast to listen to all the way through. You get a cool King Crimson cover throughout the track list. You know, my thoughts on King Crimson are a bit complicated. They're not my favorite band, but every so often they have a really cool piece of music that I actually do enjoy, and this is a cool one, frame by frame, and they certainly do it justice, so it's a lot of fun. And this is a new act for me, so I'm excited to see what they do in the future, to maybe check out some of their older records. Joe Deninzon really made an impression here on me. I think he's a fantastic artist, and excited to see what he does with Kansas, because apparently a lot of this music was written before he even became part of Kansas, so showcases that he had that influence within him even before joining the fold. So love the violin work. It's one of my favorite instruments. It's fun to hear it as such a prominent instrument in the makes, you know, amongst all these other more traditional progressive rock instrumentation. I think it's a lot of fun, and go check it out if you haven't heard of this yet. It's out there and available for you to look up and stream, if you will, or find a physical copy. It's definitely well worth your time, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. So thank you guys for joining me, and as always, enjoy the music, everybody. Bye!